Two poor rancher brothers saved a lost Apache girl. 20 years later, she returned with an army at their gate. Caleb stood at the broken fence, watching dust rise on the horizon. The shape moving toward them wasn't a dust storm. It was people, dozens of them, maybe more. His hands trembled as he gripped the wood that barely held together anymore. Nolan appeared beside him, squinting into the distance. What is that? I don't know. Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. But they're coming here. The figures grew closer, not scattered, not random, moving together with purpose. An organized mass that seemed to swallow the landscape as it approached. The brothers had no weapons left to sell, no strength left to fight. Just two men who had nothing and expected even less. Should we run? Nolan asked. Caleb shook his head. Slowly. Where would we go? The group stopped just beyond the gate. Silence pressed down like a physical weight. Then the crowd parted and a woman stepped forward. She wore clothing that spoke of influence, of respect. Her face was weathered but strong. Her eyes locked onto the brothers with an intensity that made Caleb's breath catch. She knew them, but they didn't recognize her. You don't remember me, she said. Not a question. A statement of fact that somehow carried both sadness and something else. Something that looked almost like gratitude. Nolan glanced at Caleb, confusion written across his face. Caleb searched, his memory desperate to place her. Nothing came. The woman took another step forward. 20 years ago, you found a child. A lost child that everyone said you should leave behind. The words hit Caleb like a fist to the chest. His mind raced backward through time, through years of struggle and isolation, through the moment that had changed everything. Ka, he breathed. She nodded once. I am Ka, and I have not forgotten. Behind her, the crowd remained perfectly still, waiting. The air between them felt charged with something Caleb couldn't name. This wasn't an attack, but it wasn't mercy either. It was something that existed in a space he didn't understand yet. Why are you here? Nolan's voice cracked on a question. Ka's expression shifted. Not quite a smile, not quite sorrow, because 20 years ago, you gave me a future when no one else would. She paused, her eyes moving to the ruined ranch behind them. The broken dreams scattered across the land. Now I'm here to give you one. But there was something in the way she said it. Something in the way the crowd behind her stood ready. This wasn't just about gratitude. This was about something bigger. Something that had been building for 2 decades while the brothers had been surviving barely one day at a time. Caleb felt the ground shift beneath him. Not literally, but in every way that mattered. Whatever was about to happen, whatever Ka had brought with her was going to change. Everything. The question was into what? The name hung in the air between them. Ka. Caleb felt 20 years collapse into a single breath. He remembered her small hand gripping his shirt. The way her dark eyes had looked up at him with terror and hope tangled together. She had been no more than 5 years old, lost, and alone on land that showed no mercy to the vulnerable. Nolan's face had gone pale. The girl, the one we found by the creek. Caleb nodded slowly, unable to pull his gaze away from the woman standing before them. The child he remembered had been fragile, barely alive when they discovered her collapse near the water. Now she stood with the bearing of someone who commanded respect without demanding it. The years had transformed her completely. Yet, something in her eyes remained unchanged. That same fierce determination to survive. You were dying, Caleb said quietly. We couldn't just leave you there. Kaya's expression softened slightly. No, you couldn't, even when everyone told you to, even when it cost you everything. The words struck deep because they were true. The brothers had brought Ka to their small ranch, fed her, cared for her wounds. They had searched for weeks to find her people, ignoring the warnings from neighbors who said helping her would mark them as traitors to their own kind. When they finally returned her to her tribe, the damage to their reputation had already been done. No one wanted to trade with men who sided with the Apache. No one wanted to work land next to theirs. The isolation had been slow and suffocating. Sterling Maddox had been the first to turn his back on them. Then others followed. Within months, the Brothers found themselves cut off from the community they had grown up in. Their father's ranch, once modest but stable, began to crumble under the weight of their choices. We did what was right, Nolan said, his voice carrying an edge of defiance. Even now, we'd do it again. Ka studied him for a long moment. I know you would. That's why I'm here. She gestured to the people behind her. We've been watching. We know what Maddox has done to you. We know he wants your land. We know he plans to take it tomorrow. Caleb's chest tightened. Tomorrow. The word felt like a death sentence. Maddox had given them until sundown the next day to leave. He had made it clear that if they refused, he would remove them by force. The brothers had no way to stop him. No allies left. No strength to fight men who had everything while they had nothing. How do you know that? Caleb asked. Because we listen, Ka said simply. Because we pay attention to men, like Maddox, who think they can take whatever they want without consequence. She took another step closer, closing the distance between them. You saved my life when I was powerless. Now I'm here while you feel the same way. Powerless, desperate, alone. The accuracy of her words made Caleb's throat constrict. That was exactly how he felt. How they both felt like men standing at the edge of a cliff with nowhere left to go but down. What do you want from us? Nolan asked, suspicion creeping into his tone despite the hope flickering beneath it. Kaya's eyes moved between both brothers. I don't want anything from you. I'm here to give you something, a choice. She paused, letting the weight of that word settle. You can leave tonight. Walk away and let Maddox have this land. Start over somewhere else with nothing but your lives. Caleb felt his heart sink. That wasn't a choice. That was surrender. Or Kaya continued, her voice dropping lower, carrying an intensity that made the hair on Caleb's neck stand up. You can stay, you can fight, and you can let me show you what happens to men who think compassion is weakness. The crowd behind her shifted slightly, not threateningly, but with purpose, like a force waiting to be unleashed. Caleb looked at Nolan. His brother's jaw was set, his eyes hard with an anger that had been building for 2 decades. They had lost everything for doing the right thing. Now, someone was offering them a chance to take something back. But what would that cost? And what exactly did Ka mean by fight? If we stay, Caleb said, carefully, what happens? Ka's expression became unreadable. Justice, she said, the kind that men like Maddox never see coming. The way she said it sent a chill through Caleb's bones. This wasn't just about saving them. This was about something that had been waiting for 20 years to unfold. Something Kaya had been planning. Something that would change everything. We need to know what you're planning, Nolan said. Kaya shook her head slowly. No, you need to decide if you trust me the way I once trusted you. She glanced at the ruined ranch behind them. Decide quickly. Maddox's men will be here at first light to make sure you're preparing to leave. If they find us here, everything becomes more complicated. Caleb's mind raced. Trust. That was what this came down to. They had trusted their instincts 20 years ago and paid dearly for it. Now they were being asked to trust again, to believe that this woman who owed them nothing had come back to settle a debt they had never expected to collect. How much time do we have? Caleb asked. Ka looked toward the horizon where the sun was beginning its descent. Until morning. Then everything changes. The finality in. Her voice left no room for doubt. Whatever was coming, it would arrive with the dawn. And the brothers had until then to decide if they were ready to face it. The group withdrew beyond the fence line as darkness settled over the land. Kaya and her people made no fires, no noise. They simply waited in the shadows like a promise that hadn't yet been kept. Caleb and Nolan sat inside the small cabin that had once housed their entire family. Now it housed only ghosts and difficult decisions. We can't trust this, Nolan said, pacing the narrow space between the table and the door. We don't know what she's planning. We don't know what justice means to her. Caleb stared at the worn floorboards beneath his boots. His father had laid those boards 40 years ago, back when the ranch had been something worth building. Back before everything had fallen apart. We also don't know what happens if we run. Maddox owns everything within 3 days' ride. Where we go? Nolan stopped, pacing, his hands curling into fists at his sides. At least we'd be alive. Would we? Caleb looked up, meeting his brother's eyes. Or would we just be breathing while dead inside? The question hung between them because they both knew the answer. They had been dying slowly for 20 years, watching their father's legacy crumble, watching neighbors who had once shared meals with them cross the road to avoid speaking. The isolation had been a different kind of death. Slower, more painful. Caleb's mind drifted back to that day by the creek. He had been checking fence lines when he heard the sound. Not quite. Crying. More like a whimper. Animal or human. He couldn't tell at first. Then, he saw her a small child, her clothes torn, her skin burning with fever. She had looked at him with eyes that held no expectation of mercy. He had called for Nolan. Together, they had carried her back to the ranch. Their father had been alive then, already sick, but still present. He had taken one look at the girl and said simply, "We help her. That's what decent people do." 3 weeks later, their father was dead. Some said it was his illness. Others whispered that the stress of the brother's choice had hastened his end. Caleb had never known which was true. He only knew that his father died believing they had done the right thing. He would want us to stay, Caleb said quietly. Nolan's expression tightened. People want us to survive. Not like this. Not running from men who think might makes right. A sound outside made both brothers freeze. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. Caleb reached for the rifle that leaned against the wall, but the barrel was cracked and the firing mechanism had broken months ago. They had nothing left to sell, to fix it. Nothing left to trade for ammunition, even if it worked. The door opened without knock. Ka stood in the entrance, her silhouette framed by moonlight. "You're still deciding." "It's a big decision," Nolan said sharply. Kaya stepped inside, her eyes adjusting too. The dim interior lit only by a single candle. She looked around at the bare walls, the empty shelves, the chairs, with missing legs propped against the table. "You've already lost everything except this land. Maddox will take that tomorrow. Then what will you have left?" "Our lives," Nolan shot back. "Your lives," Kaya repeated as if tasting the words. "I had a life once. Too. A family, a home. Then I got lost. Then men came. Not you. Different men. They found me before you did. They laughed at me. One of them kicked me into the creek. Said I should drown. They're like a sick animal." Caleb felt his stomach turn. They had never known that part. Never known what had happened. "Before they found her, I was drowning when you pulled me out," Kaya continued, her voice level but carrying an edge. "Like broken glass. I was dying when you fed me. I was alone when you searched for my people. You gave me back everything those men tried to take." She moved closer to the table, her fingers brushing the rough wood. "One of those men works for Maddox now. His name is Wade Langston. He'll be here tomorrow morning to make sure you're leaving. He won't remember me, but I remember him." The revelation shifted something in the air. This wasn't just about repaying a debt. This was about more than gratitude. There was something personal driving Ka, something that had been waiting for the right moment to emerge. "What are you going to do to him?" Caleb asked. Ka's eyes met his. "What he deserves. What all men like him deserve." She paused. "But only if you stay. Only if you're willing to stand beside me when the sun rises." Nolan shook his head. "This sounds like revenge." "It is," Ka said without hesitation. "But it's also justice. Sometimes they're the same thing." Caleb thought about Wade Langston. He knew the man, cruel, arrogant, the kind who enjoyed causing pain. He had been one of the first to laugh when the brothers faced isolation. One of the first to spread rumors that they were traitors. If Langston had hurt Kaya before they found her, then everything made a horrible kind of sense. "You've been planning this," Caleb said. "For how long?" "Since I learned that Maddox was trying to take your land. Since I discovered that Langston worked for him. Since I realized that the men who saved me were about to lose everything because of the men who tried to kill me." Kaya's voice remained steady, but something burned beneath the surface. The world has a strange way of bringing people back together. Nolan looked at Caleb, brothers who had faced everything together for 2 decades, who had suffered because they chose compassion over convenience, who had nothing left to lose except their dignity. If we do this, Caleb said, slowly, if we stay and fight beside you, what happens to us after? What happens? When it's done, Ka's expression softened just slightly. You get to keep your land. You get to keep your dignity. And maybe, just maybe, you get to stop feeling like the world punished you for doing the right thing. It was everything. They wanted to hear everything they needed, but there was something else in her voice. Something she wasn't saying. A piece of the plan she was holding back. There's more. Nolan said, you're not telling us everything. Ka didn't deny it. No, I'm not. Because if I tell you everything, you'll try to stop me, and I can't let that happen. She moved toward the door, pausing in the threshold. Decide before dawn. If you choose to leave, we'll be gone before Langston arrives. If you choose to stay, be ready. What's coming will be swift and final. She left them alone with the candle light and the weight of her words. Caleb stared at the closed door. Swift and final. That could mean many things. None of them simple. None of them without consequence. She's going to kill him, Nolan whispered. Langston, maybe others. That's what she means. Caleb didn't argue because he suspected his brother was right. Justice and revenge might be the same thing in Ka's eyes, but in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of men like Maddox who controlled everything, it would be murder and the brothers would be complicit. What do we do? Nolan asked. Caleb looked at his hands, scarred from years of labor, worn from fighting a losing battle against time and isolation. These were the hands that had pulled a dying child from a creek 20 years ago. The same hands that now had to decide whether to pull themselves back from the edge. I don't know, he admitted, but we have until dawn to figure it out. Outside, the night pressed close and silent. Somewhere beyond the fence, Ka and her people waited. And somewhere in town, Maddox and Langston slept soundly, believing tomorrow would bring them another easy victory. They had no idea what was actually coming. Dawn arrived cold and gray. Caleb stood at the same broken fence where everything had started the day before. Beside him, Nolan's face was set with grim determination. They had made their choice during the long hours of darkness. Not with words, but with the simple act of staying, of refusing to run no more time. Ka emerged from the shadows where her people had spent the night. She looked at both brothers, reading their decision in their posture before anyone spoke. You're staying. We're staying, Caleb confirmed. His voice was rough from lack of sleep and too much thinking. But we need to know what you're planning. You'll see soon. Enough. Ka's eyes moved to the dirt road that led from town. They'll be here within the hour. Langston and 3 others. Maddox won't come himself. He never does his own difficult work. Nolan shifted his weight, tension radiating from him like heat. And when they arrive, you stand your ground. You tell them you're not leaving. Ka's tone was matter of fact, as if discussing something as simple as weather. They'll threaten you, maybe try to intimidate you. Let them. Caleb's chest tightened, and then I remind them of something they forgot. Ka's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes, something that looked like satisfaction mixed with old pain. That actions have consequences, even ones committed against a child 20 years ago. Before Caleb could ask more, Kaya gestured to her people. They moved with practiced efficiency, positioning themselves behind buildings, inside the old barn, anywhere that provided cover. While remaining hidden, within minutes, the ranch appeared exactly as it had before. Abandoned, desperate, defeated. Stay visible, Ka instructed the brothers. Act like you're alone, like you have no choice but to leave. We're bait, Nolan muttered. You're survivors, Ka corrected. And sometimes surviving means looking weak until the moment you show your teeth. She disappeared into the barn, leaving the brothers standing. In the open, the sun climbed higher, burning off the morning chill. Caleb's hands were sweating despite the cool air. 20 years of humiliation. 20 years of paying for kindness. It was all coming down to this moment. The sound of hoof beats reached them first. 4 riders appeared on the horizon, moving at an unhurried pace. Men who believed they held all the power. Men who had no reason to expect resistance. Wade. Langston rode at the front. Caleb recognized him immediately. Tall and broad-shouldered with a face that seemed permanently set in a sneer. The kind of man who found pleasure in other people's suffering. Behind him rode 3 others, all wearing expressions of bored contempt. They stopped 20 feet from the fence. Langston's eyes swept over the ruined ranch, a smile tugging at his mouth. Well, still here, are we? This is our land, Caleb said, forcing his voice to remain steady. Langston laughed, a harsh sound without any real humor. Your land. That's funny. Maddox owns everything worth owning around here. This patch of dirt is just taking up space. He leaned forward in his saddle. But he's a generous man. He's giving you until sundown to clear out. After that, we clear you out. Nolan took a step forward. We're not leaving. The smile dropped from Langston's face. What did you say? We're not leaving, Nolan repeated louder this time. This ranch belonged to our father. It belongs to us. We're staying. One or the other. Riders, a younger man with a scarred cheek, spat on the ground. You two really that stupid? You got nothing? No. Money, no friends, no way to stop us from burning this place to ash. Caleb felt his pulse hammering in his ears. Every instinct screamed at him to back down, to apologize, to beg for more time. But he thought about his father, about the girl they had saved, about Kaya, standing somewhere in the shadows, watching to see if they would hold. We're staying, Caleb said. Langston's expression darkened. You don't get it, do you? This isn't a negotiation. This is us being polite, giving you a chance to walk away with your lives. He dismounted slowly, deliberately. But if you want to do this the hard way, that works for me, too. He walked toward them, his boots crunching on the dry earth. The other 3 riders remained, mounted, hands resting casually near their weapons, not threatening yet, but ready. Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. The moment where everything would either change or end, where Ka would show her hand or leave. Them to face this alone. Langston stopped just on the other side of the fence, close enough that Caleb could smell the tobacco on his breath. Last chance. Walk away right now, or what happens next is on you. Caleb opened his mouth to respond, but movement from the barn caught his attention. Ka stepped into the open. Behind her, 20 others followed. Then more. They emerged from every building, every shadow, every hiding place. Within seconds, the ranch was surrounded by Ka's people. Not threatening, not advancing, simply present. A silent wall of bodies that outnumbered Langston's group 5-1. The change in Langston's expression was immediate. Shock, then anger, then something that might have been the first flicker of fear. What is this? He demanded, his hand moving toward his weapon. Don't, Ka said quietly. The single word carried enough weight to freeze Langston's hand in place. She walked forward until she stood between the brothers and Langston. You don't remember me, but I remember you. Langston's eyes narrowed, studying her face. I don't know what you're talking about. 20 years ago, a creek about 6 miles west of here, you found a child. Ka's voice remained calm, but each word was precise, sharp, a lost child. And instead of helping, you laughed. You kicked her. You said she should drown like a sick animal. Recognition flickered across Langston's face. Brief, quickly suppressed, but unmistakable. That child didn't drown. Kaya continued. These men saved her. They gave her life when you tried to take it. And now, too, decades later, you're here to take from them. She took another step closer. But I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen. I'm here to show you what happens when cruelty meets consequence. Langston's jaw clenched. You threatening me? No, Ka said. I'm making you a promise. The air felt charged with something dangerous, something that had been building for years and was now ready to break. Caleb could see the calculation running behind Langston's eyes. For men against dozens, the odds were impossible. Maddox won't stand for this, Langston said. but his voice had lost its certainty. Maddox isn't here, Kaya replied. You are, and right now you have a choice. The same choice these brothers gave me 20 years ago. Life or death. Langston's hand twitched toward his weapon again. The rider with the scarred cheek shifted in his saddle. Tension pulled tight as a wire ready to snap. Caleb held his breath, waiting to see which direction this moment would break. And in that breath, everything changed. The rider with the scarred cheek made the first move. His hand dropped toward his weapon, but he never reached it. 3 of Ka's people moved. Like water, fast and silent. They pulled him from his saddle before he could draw. The other 2 riders found themselves similarly surrounded, hands forced away from their weapons, horses spooked and stepping nervously. Langston stood frozen, his hands still hovering near his belt. Kaya stepped closer until only a foot separated them. Go ahead, she said softly. Reach for it. Give me a reason. Caleb saw the war playing out. On Langston's face, pride versus survival. The need to maintain dominance versus the reality of being completely outnumbered. Finally, slowly, Langston's hand dropped to his side. Smart choice, Ka said. She gestured to her people. Disarm them. All of them. Within moments, Langston and his 3 companions stood stripped of their weapons. Their horses led away. They were surrounded but not bound. Humiliated but not harmed. Yet what now? Langston's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. You kill us? That what this is? No, Ka said. I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to teach you. She turned to address everyone present. 20 years ago, these brothers chose compassion when everyone else chose cruelty. They saved a child that men like you thought deserved to die. They lost everything because of it. Their reputation, their livelihood, their place in a community that should have honored them instead of abandoning them. She walked in a slow circle around Langston. You took from them. Maddox took from them. This entire town took from them. And you all thought there would never be consequences, that kindness was weakness, that mercy was something to punish. Ka stopped facing Langston directly. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to ride back to Maddox. You're going to tell him that this land is no longer available, that the brothers are under protection, that anyone who tries to take from them, again, will answer to me and everyone behind me. Langston's face flushed red. Maddox owns half this territory. You think he's going to back down because some choose your next words carefully. Ka interrupted, her voice dropping too. Something dangerous. Because what comes after them determines whether you ride back or get carried back. The threat was clear, real. Langston's mouth snapped shut. But that's not all. Kaya continued, turning to address Caleb and Nolan. These men need to understand the full weight of what they've done. So, they're going to help rebuild what they helped destroy. Confusion crossed Caleb's face. What do you mean? For the next month, Langston and his companions will work this ranch. They'll repair fences, fix buildings, do whatever labor these brothers need. Every day from dawn until dusk, Ka's eyes never left Langston. And if they refuse, if they fail to show up even once, then everyone will know that Sterling Maddox's men are cowards, that they can't honor a simple debt, that their word means nothing. The brilliance of it struck Caleb immediately. Ka wasn't just protecting them. She was forcing Langston to publicly acknowledge his debt, to perform visible penance in a place where reputation meant everything. This was a punishment worse than violence. This was humiliation that would last. Maddox will never allow this. One of the other riders said, his voice shaking. Then, Maddox can come explain that himself, Ka replied. He can ride out here and face me directly. But I think we both know he won't. Men like Maddox don't do their own confronting. They send others to take their risks for them. She paused. So the question isn't what Maddox will allow. The question is whether you four want to explain to everyone in town why you failed such a simple task. Langston's jaw worked silently. Caleb could see the calculation happening. Refusing meant looking weak. Accepting meant public humiliation, but refusing also meant facing Ka's people. And that was a fight they couldn't win. 1 month, Langston finally said through gritted teeth. Then we're done. 1 month, Kaya agreed. And if at the end of that month, this ranch isn't restored, we extend the arrangement. Fair. Nothing about this was fair, and everyone knew it. But Langston nodded because he had no other choice. Ka gestured to her. People, return their horses. Their weapons stay here until the month is complete. They can walk back to town and explain to Maddox why they returned empty-handed and unarmed. The 4 men were released. They stood for a moment, looking at each other, then at Ka, then at the brothers. Langston's eyes burned. With hatred. This isn't over. You're right, Ka said calmly. It isn't. It's just beginning. And every day for the next month, you'll remember that actions have consequences, even ones committed, against children you thought no one cared about. Langston turned and began walking toward town. His 3 companions followed, their shoulders hunched with shame. The watching crowd remained silent until the 4 men disappeared over the horizon. Only then did Caleb allow himself to breathe. His legs felt weak. His hands were shaking. That was necessary, Kaya finished. And not enough. Nolan looked at her sharply. What do you mean, not enough? Gau's expression hardened. Langston will do his month. He'll rebuild your ranch because his pride won't allow him to fail publicly. But Maddox is still out there, and men like him don't accept defeat gracefully. She turned to face both brothers fully. What happened here this morning will spread. By tonight, everyone will know that you're no longer alone, that you have protection. That's good, isn't it? Caleb asked. For you? Yes, for me. Kaya paused, choosing her words carefully. Maddox will see this as a challenge, not just to his control of this land, but to his authority over everything. He'll come here not with 4 men, with 20, maybe more. The weight of her words settled over Caleb like a cold blanket. They had won this morning's confrontation, but in doing so, they had started something larger, something that wouldn't end with rebuilt fences and restored buildings. When Nolan asked, Kaya looked at the sun now, fully risen and bright overhead. Soon. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, but soon. She met their eyes, which means we need to prepare, because when Maddox comes, he won't come to negotiate. He'll come to destroy, and we need to be ready. Caleb felt his stomach clench. Ready? How? Ka's smile was grim. That's what we're going to figure out, because what saved you this morning was numbers. And surprise. But Maddox will bring numbers, too. And he won't be surprised twice. She walked toward the barn, her people following. Gather whatever tools you have. Anything that can be used to fortify this place. We have maybe 1 day to turn this ranch into something defensible. After that, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Caleb looked at Nolan. His brother's face was pale, but determined. They had made their choice. They had stood their ground, and now they would face whatever came next together. But as Caleb watched, Kaya's people began organizing, moving with practiced efficiency. A question nagged at him. How had she known Maddox would respond this way? How had she known any of this would unfold like it had? It was almost as if she had been planning for this exact scenario, as if everything that had happened this morning was just the opening move in a much longer game. And if that was true, what other moves had she already planned? What else hadn't she told them? The questions would have to wait because work needed to be done. Defenses needed to be built. And somewhere in town, Sterling Maddox was learning that 2 poor rancher brothers were no longer easy prey. What he would do with that information would determine everything that came next. They worked through the day without stopping. Ka's people moved like they had done this before, reinforcing weak points in the barn. Walls, stacking water barrels at strategic locations, creating clear sight lines while eliminating places where attackers could hide. Caleb and Nolan worked alongside them, their muscles burning from labor they hadn't performed in months. By midday, a rider arrived, not one of Maddox's men. A young woman from town, her face tight with worry. She dismounted quickly and approached Kaya directly. There, coming, she said, her voice low but urgent. Maddox is gathering men, 20 at least, maybe more. He's telling everyone that squatters are threatening his property rights. That lawlessness needs to be stopped. Kaya nodded unsurprised. When? Tonight. After dark. He wants to catch you unprepared. How do you know this? Nolan demanded. The young woman glanced at him, then back to Ka. Because I work in his house. I hear things. She hesitated. My mother was Apache. Maddox doesn't know. No one knows. But Kaya found me 2 years ago. Asked me to listen, to watch, to remember. The revelation sent a chill through Caleb. This wasn't spontaneous. Kaya had been planning this for years, positioning people, gathering information, waiting for the right moment. How many others? Caleb asked Ka. How many people have you placed? Kaya's expression remained neutral. Enough to know what men like Maddox do in the shadows. Enough to understand how power works in this territory. She turned back to the young woman. Are any of them having second thoughts? Anyone refusing to ride? 3 said no. The rest are coming. Maddox promised them a share of the land once it's cleared. The young woman's jaw tightened. He's telling them you're savages. That you're the ones threatening innocent people. Of course he is. Kaya's voice carried no anger, just acceptance of a pattern she had seen too many times. Thank you. Get back before you're missed. The young woman nodded and rode away quickly. Once she was gone, Ka turned to the brothers. 20 men, well-armed, coming in darkness. Those are difficult odds. Caleb felt his mouth go dry. Can we hold against that many? We don't have to hold. We have to make it too costly to continue. Kaya gestured to the fortifications they had been building all day. Maddox expects to overwhelm us to drive us off or kill us. Quickly. But if we make him pay for every foot of ground, if we make this more trouble than it's worth, he'll reconsider, or he'll bring even more men. Nolan said he might. Ka admitted. But there's a limit to how many people will risk their lives for another man's greed, especially when that man is safely back in town while they're the ones bleeding. She walked toward the main house, motioning for the brothers to follow. Inside, she spread a rough map on the table drawn in charcoal on a piece of cloth. It showed the ranch, the approaches, the places where defenders could position themselves. They'll come. From the east, Kaya said, pointing. It's the easiest approach. Good cover from the rocks. They'll try to surround us, cut off any escape. And if they do, Caleb asked, they won't because we're not staying inside the perimeter. Ka's finger traced a different path on the map. We let them commit to the approach. Let them think they have us trapped. Then we hit them from behind from the sides. Make them realize they're the one surrounded. The strategy was sound but terrifying. It required perfect timing, perfect coordination. One mistake, and they would be caught in the open, outnumbered and vulnerable. You've done this before, Nolan said. Not a question, a statement. Ka looked up from a map. I fought men who thought power gave them the right to take whatever they wanted. Yes, I've done this before. When? Caleb asked. When I was 16, a group of traders came through Apache territory. They took 3 girls, so they were spoils. Property. Ka's voice remained level, but something cold flickered in her eyes. We got them back. The traders learned that some property fights back. Caleb felt his understanding shift. Ka wasn't just repaying a debt. She was fighting a war she had been fighting her entire life. A war against men who believed strength meant they could take without consequence. How did it end? Nolan asked, quietly, with the traders. They left, the ones who could still walk. Ka folded the map carefully. Violence isn't my first choice, but sometimes it's the only language certain men understand. Maddox is one of those men. He won't listen to reason or appeals to decency. He'll only respond to force. A question had been burning in Caleb's mind since morning. Why now? Why wait 20 years to come back? Ka was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried weight that hadn't been there before. Because 20 years ago, I was a child with nothing. No power, no influence, no way to help you, even if I wanted to. She looked at both brothers. But I remembered, and as I grew, I made sure I would never be powerless again. I learned. I built alliances. I became someone who could protect others the way you protected me. And when you heard about Maddox, Caleb began, I saw an opportunity to repay a debt and stop a man who had been hurting people for decades. Two problems, one solution. Kaya moved to the window, looking out at the people still working to fortify the ranch. These people with me, they've all been hurt by men like Maddox. All had something taken. All were told there was nothing they could do about it. She turned back to face them. So yes, this is about you, about repaying what you did for me. But it's also bigger than that. It's about showing that cruelty doesn't go unanswered. That kindness isn't weakness. That people who do the right thing don't have to stand alone. The words hit Caleb harder than he expected. For 20 years, he and Nolan had felt alone, abandoned, punished for doing what their father taught them was right. Now, suddenly, they weren't alone, and the cost of that company was about to be tested. Tonight, Nolan said, when they come, what do you need us to do? Kaya's expression softened slightly. Stay alive, stay together, and trust that what we're doing isn't just fighting. It's sending a message that will echo long after tonight is over. Outside, the sun was beginning its descent. Shadows grew longer. The temperature dropped. People moved with increased urgency, finishing last preparations, checking weapons, reviewing positions. The calm before violence has a particular quality, a stillness that feels like the world holding its breath. Caleb watched it all and felt fear mixing with something else, something he hadn't felt in 2 decades. Hope. Not hope that everything would be fine, but hope that what they were doing mattered, that their fathers' belief in doing right might finally be vindicated. What if we lose? He asked, quietly. Kaya didn't sugarcoat her answer. Then we lose fighting for something that matters. That's more than most people can say. She paused. But we're not going to lose because Maddox thinks he's fighting two desperate brothers. He doesn't know what's actually waiting for him. A shout came from outside. One of Kaya's scouts, returning at a gallop. He dismounted quickly, speaking rapidly in a language Caleb didn't understand. Ka's expression tightened. They're early, she said, not waiting for full dark. They're coming now. The camp exploded into control motion. People running to positions. Final checks of weapons and fortifications. Caleb felt his heart hammering against his ribs. This was it. No more preparation. No more planning. Now came the test. Ka gripped his shoulder briefly. Remember, you're not alone anymore. Whatever happens next, you're not alone. And she was gone, moving to coordinate the defense. Nolan appeared beside Caleb, his face pale but set with determination. Ready? Nolan asked. Caleb looked at the horizon where dust was beginning to rise. 20 men or more coming to take everything. Coming to finish what isolation and time had started. No, Caleb admitted. But we're doing it anyway. The dust cloud grew larger, closer, and somewhere in that approaching mass was Sterling Maddox's. What made manifest the force that had been crushing them for 2 decades. But this time they had something Maddox didn't expect. This time they had teeth. They came like a storm. 23 riders, Caleb counted, more than expected. They spread out as they approached, forming a loose line that would encircle the ranch. Professional, organized. These weren't farmers or drifters. These were men who knew how to fight. Sterling Medicsrode. In the center, Caleb recognized him from town. A thick SH-shouldered man with silver hair and a face that had never known doubt. He raised his hand, and the riders stopped just outside rifle range. Smart, cautious. Caleb Rollins. Maddox's voice carried across the distance. Nolan Rollins. I'm here to give you one final chance. Leave now. Walk away. This doesn't have to end badly. Caleb stood beside the fence. Nolan at his side. Behind them, the ranch appeared nearly empty. Just 2 men and a few visible defenders. Exactly as Kaya had planned. This is our land. Caleb called back. We're not leaving. Max shook his head, a gesture of false regret. Then you're choosing this. Remember that. He turned to his men. Anyone who resists, you put down. Anyone who runs, let them go. But the brothers stay. They need to understand what happens to people who don't know their place. The riders began to advance. Slow, steady, closing the distance. Caleb's hands were sweating. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, but he held his ground. Because Kaya had told him to trust. Because after 20 years of backing down, he was done running. The riders were 50 yards away when the first part of Ka's plan activated. Her people had spent the afternoon digging shallow trenches, covered with brush. The horses hit them at a trot. 3 went down immediately, throwing their riders. The neat line collapsed into confusion as other riders pulled up short, trying to avoid the same fate. That moment of chaos was all Ka needed. Her people rose from positions behind the barn, the house, the old storage building. Not attacking, just appearing, showing numbers, showing that Maddox had ridden into something more prepared than he expected. Maddox's expression shifted from confidence to calculation. He raised his hand again, stopping his men from advancing further. So the Apache girl brought friends. Doesn't change anything. You're still outnumbered, are we? Ka's voice came from behind him. Maddox spun in his saddle. Another group of Kaya's people had positioned themselves on the eastern ridge, the route Maddox would need for retreat. He was surrounded not by more people, but by the perception of more people, by the reality that this wasn't the easy victory he had expected. "This is my land," Maddox said, his voice tight, with controlled anger. "Everything you see mine. Those brothers are squatting on property that belongs to me. Show me the deed," Ka said calmly, walking forward until she stood in open ground between both groups. "Show me the legal document that says this ranch is yours." Maddox's jaw clenched. "I don't need to show you anything because it doesn't exist," Ka continued. "This ranch was paid for 40 years ago by the brother's father. The deed is registered legal, but you've been telling everyone it's yours because no one challenged you. Because the brothers were alone and poor, and you thought that made them easy targets." She gestured to the people surrounding them. "They're not alone anymore. So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn around. You're going to ride back to town. And you're going to leave these brothers in peace." Maddox laughed. "A harsh sound. Or what? You'll fight me, you and your people against mine." He leaned forward in his saddle. "I've got resources you can't imagine. More men, more money. I can make this fight last until everyone you know is dead or broken." "You could try," Ka agreed. "But look at your men. Really look at them." Maddox's eyes swept his riders. Several were still dealing with thrown horses. Others were glancing nervously at the people surrounding them. A few were openly questioning whether this fight was worth the risk. "They're not fighting for their land," Kaya said. "They're fighting for yours, for a promise of payment. For a man who stays safe in town while they take all the risks." She raised her voice slightly. "Ask yourselves, how much is Sterling Maddox paying you to die today? Because that's what this is, a fight where you bleed and he profits." Murmurs rippled through Maddox's group. Not open rebellion, but doubt. The kind that spreads like poison once it starts. "Don't listen to her," Maddox snapped. "She's trying to divide us, to make you weak." "I'm telling them the truth," Kaya countered. "That this isn't their fight. That they don't have to die protecting the greed of a man who sees them as tools, as expendable resources." One of Maddox's riders, an older man with gray streaking his beard, lowered his weapon. "She's got a point, Sterling. This ain't what you told us. You said they were squatters, criminals. You didn't say they had deeds. You didn't say this was about taking legal land." "It's mine," Maddox insisted, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Everything here is mine." "Prove it," the older rider said. "Show us the deed that says so." Maddox's face darkened with rage. "You questioning me, Curtis? After everything I've done for you?" "I'm asking for proof," Curtis said steadily. "Because if this land is legally theirs, then we're not lawmen. We're thieves. And I didn't ride out here to steal from people defending what's rightfully theirs." Another rider nodded, then another. The consensus was breaking. Maddox could see it happening, could see his carefully assembled force crumbling under the weight of questions. He couldn't answer. "Fine," Maddox said through gritted teeth. We'll settle this legally in town with proper authorities. He pulled his horse around. But this isn't over. Not by a long way. Yes, Caius said quietly. It is. Maddox froze. Something in her tone made him turn back. What did you say? It's over. Got Apache. Because while you were riding out here to take land that isn't yours, someone was riding too. The territorial capital with copies of the deed, with testimony from people who watched you threaten the brothers. With evidence of every illegal thing you've done to expand your holdings over the last decade. The color drained from Maddox's face. You're lying. Am I? Kaya's expression remained neutral. Why? Don't you ride back to town and find out? See if the marshal from the capital is waiting for you. See if all your careful plans are falling apart while you're out here threatening two poor rancher brothers. For the first time, Caleb saw fear in Maddox's eyes. Real fear, not of violence, but of consequences, of the possibility that his carefully constructed empire was collapsing while he chased after one small piece of land. You planned this, Maddox breathed. All of it. I waited for you to make a move big enough that people couldn't ignore. Kaya corrected. You did the rest yourself. Your greed, your arrogance, your certainty that no one would stand against you. She stepped closer. But someone did, and now everyone will know what kind of man you really are. Maddox's hand moved toward his weapon. Several of his riders tensed. The moment stretched tight. One move, one shot, and everything would explode into violence neither side could control. Then Curtis spoke. Don't, Sterling. It's over. Let it be over. Maddox's hand stopped. His face twisted with rage and humiliation. But slowly, carefully, he pulled his hand away from his weapon. This isn't over, he repeated. But the words were hollow now. Empty threats from a man watching his power crumble. Right away, Ka said. While you still can. Maddox stared at her for a long moment, then at the brothers, then at his own men who were no longer looking at him with respect. Finally, he turned his horse and began riding back toward town. Most of his riders followed. A few stayed back, helping those who had been thrown, but the force that had come to destroy was leaving. Defeated. Caleb couldn't quite believe it. They had won, not through violence, through strategy, through exposing the truth of what Maddox was. But as he watched the riders disappear, one question burned in his mind. Had Ka really sent evidence to the capital, or had that been a bluff? And if it was a bluff, what would happen when Maddox discovered the truth? The dust from Maddox's retreat had barely settled when Caleb turned to Ka. Was it real? The evidence you sent to the capital? Ka's expression was unreadable for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. It was real. I sent it 3 weeks ago, long before Maddox made his move today. Relief flooded through Caleb, followed immediately by confusion. 3 weeks? How? Did you know he would try to take our land? Because that's what men like Maddox do. They push until someone pushes back. Ka gestured for them to follow her into the house. Inside away from the others. She pulled a folded paper from her coat. This is a copy. The original is with the territorial marshal by now. Caleb unfolded it. Page after page of careful documentation. Dates, names, testimonies from people Maddox had threatened or displaced over the years. Property deeds that showed clear ownership by people who had mysteriously abandoned their claims. Patterns of intimidation and theft, stretching back more than a decade. How did you gather all this? Nolan breathed, reading over his brother's shoulder. Slowly, carefully, Ka sat at the table, the exhaustion of the day finally showing on her face. After you returned me to my people 20 years ago, I watched what happened to you. I saw how the town turned against you, how Maddox was always there, waiting to benefit from your isolation. It made me angry, but anger without power is just noise. She leaned back in the chair. So I waited. I learned. I found others who had been hurt by Maddox. People who were too afraid to speak alone, but might speak together. It took years, but eventually I had enough. Enough proof that even men who wanted to ignore Maddox's crimes couldn't. Why not just take it to authorities before? Caleb asked. Why? Wait until now. because without a clear incident, they would have buried it, called it a dispute between neighbors. But Maddox threatening you with armed men trying to take legal land through force. That crossed a line even corrupt. Officials can't ignore. Ka met their eyes. I needed him to show everyone what he really was. And you needed to see that standing up to him was possible. The strategy was brilliant and ruthless. Ka had used the brothers as bait, not to hurt them, but to give Maddox enough rope to hang himself. It should have made Caleb angry. Instead, he felt something closer to awe. What happens now? Nolan asked. Now we wait. The marshal will come. He'll review the evidence. He'll talk to witnesses. And Maddox will face actual consequences for the first time in his life. Kaya stood, moving to the window. It won't be quick. Men like him have money, influence. They know how to delay justice, but it will happen. Caleb looked at the papers. Again, so many names. So many people hurt. All these others. The ones Maddox pushed off their land. Will they get back? Some will, some won't. The law moves slowly, and not everyone kept their deeds. Ka's voice carried genuine regret, but at least they'll know they weren't forgotten. That what happened to them mattered. A commotion outside drew their attention. Wade Langston had arrived with his 3 companions. They looked exhausted and humiliated, but they had come, as promised, to begin their month of labor to rebuild what they had helped destroy. Langston's eyes found Kaya through the window. Even from a distance, Caleb could see the hatred burning there. But he also saw something else. Resignation, the understanding that he had lost, and continuing to fight would only make things worse. He'll honor the agreement, Kaya said quietly. Not because he wants to, but because failing to do so would destroy what little reputation he has left. And after the month, Caleb asked, what then? Then he'll leave. Find work somewhere else. Somewhere people don't know what he did to a child 20 years ago. Ka turned from the window. That's his punishment. Not death, not prison, but shame. Knowing that everyone knows what kind of man he is. The day wore on. Ka's people began preparing to leave their work done. They had come to help, but this wasn't their home. They had lives elsewhere, responsibilities that had been put on. Hold to answer Kaya's call. As the sun began setting, Kaya walked the property with the brothers. They passed fences that would be repaired, buildings that would be restored, land that would be worked again. For the first time in 20 years, the ranch had a future. I can't stay, Kaya said eventually. My people need me, and there are others like you. Good people who did the right thing and got punished for it. I can't save everyone, but I can help when I can. Caleb felt a strange mixture of gratitude and loss. You gave us everything. How do we repay that? By living well, by working this land, by proving that kindness isn't weakness. Ka stopped, looking at the horizon where the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and red. 20 years ago, you taught me that some people choose compassion even when it costs them. Now I've taught you that those choices echo forward in ways we can't predict. We'll never forget this, Nolan said, his voice thick with emotion. Ka smiled slightly. I know, but more importantly, neither will this territory. By tomorrow, everyone will know what happened here. They'll know that 2 poor rancher brothers stood against Sterling Maddox and won. That story will spread, and maybe, just maybe, it will give other people courage to stand up when they're being pushed down. That night, as Ka and her people prepared to leave, Caleb stood at the fence, the same fence where this had all begun, where he had watched dust rising and feared the worst. Now he watched that dust settle and saw possibility instead of doom. Ka approached one final time. There's something I never told you about that day you found me. Caleb turned, listening. I had given up completely. I was ready to die by that creek. And then you appeared. 2 strangers who had no reason to help, who risked everything to save someone they didn't know. Her eyes glistened slightly in the moonlight. You didn't just save my life. You taught me what kind of person I wanted to be. Someone who helps when no one else will. Someone who stands up when everyone else walks away. She placed something in his hand. A small stone worn smooth by water. I kept this from that creek, to remember. Now I want you to have it. 2. Remember that what you did mattered. Not just for me, but for everyone I've helped since. Caleb's throat tightened. He couldn't speak, could only nod. Kaya mounted her horse. If you need me, send word through the young woman who brought news of Maddox. She'll know how to find me. And she was gone, leading her people into the darkness. Caleb stood there long after they disappeared, the stone warm in his palm. Nolan joined him. You think we'll see her again? Maybe, maybe not. Caleb closed his hand around the stone. But I think that's okay. She gave us what we needed. Now we have to do the rest ourselves. Think we can? Nolan asked. Caleb looked at the ranch at Langston and his men already, starting repairs under moonlight at the land that was finally truly theirs again. Yeah, I think we can. 3 weeks later, the territorial marshal arrived. He came with 2 deputies and enough legal documentation to fill a wagon. Sterling Maddox was arrested on charges of fraud, intimidation, and illegal seizure of property. The trial lasted 4 days. Testimony from dozens of witnesses painted a picture of systematic corruption that had gone unchallenged. For too long, Maddox was stripped of most of his holdings. Properties that had been taken illegally were returned to their rightful owners. He was given 5 years in territorial prison. His empire, built on fear and greed, collapsed in less than a week. Wade Langston and his companions completed their month of work. The ranch that had been falling apart was restored. Fences stood straight. Buildings had new roofs. The water system functioned again. On the final day, Langston approached Caleb. Without speaking, handed him a folded paper and left. Inside was a single sentence written in rough hand. I was wrong about you. It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement. And for Caleb, that was enough. The town's attitude changed slowly at first, then rapidly. People who had crossed the street to avoid the brothers now nodded in greeting. Merchants who had refused their business suddenly had goods available. The isolation that had defined 20 years of their lives began to crack and crumble. Curtis, the older rider who had questioned Maddox, came to the ranch personally. I got my land back, the South 40 that Maddox claimed. Well, my wife died. Marshall says it's legally mine again. He hesitated. I know. I rode with him that day. I know I was part of the problem, but if you need help working this place, if you need a neighbor you can count on, I like to try to make things right. Caleb thought about refusing, about holding on to the anger and betrayal. But he remembered what Ka had said. That kindness wasn't weakness. That choosing compassion even, when it cost something, was what made people worth knowing. We could use the help, Caleb said, and we could use a neighbor we can trust. Curtis's relief was visible. He extended his hand. After a moment, Caleb shook it. The ranch began to produce again, small at first. A few crops, some livestock purchased with loans from merchants eager to make amends. But it grew, and with it the brothers grew not just in prosperity, but in something harder to measure. Confidence, purpose, the sense that their father's belief in doing right had finally been vindicated. 6 months after Kaya's departure, a young couple arrived at the ranch. They were Apache. The woman explained in careful English that Kaya had told them about the brothers, about land that needed working and men who could be trusted. They were looking for a place to start over, away from territories where tensions between settlers and tribes ran hot. Caleb hired them without hesitation. Then he hired 2 more families. Then a drifter who needed work and a chance. The ranch became something it had never been before. Not just a property, but a community. A place where people who didn't fit elsewhere could find purpose and safety. Word spread. Within a year, other ranchers were asking Caleb and Nolan for advice. How they managed to work successfully with people others said couldn't be trusted. How they built something sustainable when everything had been against them. The brothers never claimed to have special wisdom. They simply treated people the way their father had taught them, with respect, with fairness, with the understanding that everyone deserved a chance. 2 years after Ka's visit, Caleb stood at the fence again, the same fence where he had watched dust rising and feared the end. Now he watched workers bringing in A harvest. Watch smoke rising from chimneys of small houses built for the families who worked the land. Watched. Nolan teaching a young boy how to repair a bridle properly. The stone Kaya had given him sat on a shelf in the house. He touched it sometimes, remembering, but he didn't need it to remember anymore. The lesson was written in everything they had built, in every person they had helped, in every choice to show compassion when cruelty would have been easier. A rider appeared on the horizon. For a moment, Caleb's heart jumped, hoping it might be Ka, but it was the young woman who had warned them about Maddox. She dismounted, smiling. "Message from Ka," she said, handing him a folded paper. Caleb opened it. The writing was brief but warm. "I hear your ranch is thriving. I hear you've helped people who needed it. I hear you're doing what I hoped you would. Thank you for proving that the world can be better when good people refuse to give up. You saved me once. Now you're saving others. That's how it should work. That's how we change things. One act of kindness at a time." Caleb folded the letter. Carefully, he would keep it with a stone. Reminders of the day when two poor rancher brothers thought they had nothing left, and a woman they had saved 20 years earlier returned with an army of people ready to stand beside them. The title of that story would be simple. Two brothers saved a lost girl. 20 years later, she saved them back. But the real story was more complex. It was about how one choice made with no expectation of reward echoed forward through time. About how kindness compounds like interest, growing into something larger than the original act. Nolan joined him at the fence. "Good news, the best kind," Caleb said. "Confirmation that we're doing something right. P will be proud," Nolan said quietly. Caleb nodded. Their father had died believing they had made the right choice, even as that choice destroyed their lives, but he never got to see what came after. Never got to see the redemption that took 20 years to arrive. "Yeah," Caleb agreed. He would be. The sun was setting, painting the land in gold and amber. The ranch was alive with the sounds of people finishing the day's work, children laughing, adults talking, the sounds of a community that functioned because someone had decided that outcasts deserve a chance. Curtis rode up, his own ranch restored and productive. "Caleb, Nolan, we're having a gathering next week, celebrating the harvest. You're invited, both of you, and everyone who works with you." There was a time when such an invitation would have been unthinkable. When the brothers were too damaged by association, too marked by their choice to save a child that others thought they should have left to die. "We'll be there," Caleb said. Curtis smiled. "Good. It won't be the same without you." He tipped his hat and rode off. Nolan looked at his brother. How did this happen? How do we go from losing everything to having all this? Caleb thought about the question, about the long path from that creek 20 years ago to this moment. About a small girl who refused to forget. About an army that appeared when hope seemed lost. "We didn't give up," he said. "Finally, we kept doing what we knew was right, even when it cost us everything. And eventually that mattered." It was a simple answer, but it was true. They had saved one life, without expecting anything in return. That life had saved them back, and in doing so had shown them how to save others. The cycle continued, expanding outward like ripples in water. As darkness settled over the ranch, Caleb went inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, new opportunities. To choose kindness over convenience. But tonight, he would rest knowing that everything their father believed about goodness and decency had been proven right. 20 years was a long time to wait for vindication. But it had come not as a miracle, not as magic, but as the natural consequence of refusing to let cruelty have the final word. The two poor rancher brothers who had saved a lost Apache girl had learned the most important lesson of all, that some debts take decades to repay. That some armies arrive not with violence, but with solidarity. That some battles are won, not by the strongest, but by those who refuse to stop being decent, no matter how much it costs. And that, in the end, was the only victory that truly mattered. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale from the frontier where courage and destiny collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything too.